Lake Effect brings you conversations about what's happening in Milwaukee and the people, places, and organizations that shape our community. This is Lake Effect Spotlight from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.
Nearly every day, there's news about immigration in the United States. This week, we're taking a step back to explore Milwaukee and Wisconsin's immigration history in our series, Making Wisconsin. Today, we'll talk about the history of refugees in Wisconsin, specifically Hmong refugees. Hmong people helped the United States in the fight against communism during the Vietnam War. After the war ended, many fled Laos due to political persecution and settled in the United States as refugees. Wisconsin is home to the third largest Hmong community in the country. WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez shares the story of one Hmong family from Green Bay and their journey. He's joined by Consua Xiong, a filmmaker who documented her father's migration story in her film, Why My Dad Loves.
I think a nice place to start would be, how would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Consua Xiong. You can also call me NK. My name translates to beautiful otter or beautiful seaweed. A lot of controversy over that, but I am a Hmong filmmaker from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Okay, I ask because I first learned about you through one of your films, Why My Dad Loves.
Growing up, my dad was always recording us. So growing up, I never really learned about the Hmong history, especially in school. I remember vividly in high school when we were covering the Vietnam War, I was like, they're definitely gonna speak on Hmong people. They've got to. And I think there was only one mention, unfortunately. Everything else was about the U.S. And I guess I made this film because I really wanted to connect with my parents. Even now, I still have so many questions, like how much they sacrificed for me and my siblings and how they connect with Laos, even now as refugees.
Those are big questions.
Mm-hmm.
Where are your parents today?
They're in Green Bay. This is where they've been for over 30 years, 9 children, and so many homes. So many homes, yeah.
You know, we could go ask them some of these questions.
My dad's just saying that he wants you to know that they don't speak English very well, and so they'll need me to translate.
Something I found interesting about visiting your parents is that they are also storytellers.
Yeah, my dad and my mom loved taking photos of us, taking photos of themselves, especially my dad. Oh, rewind. Because we can't rewind in our lives, they wanted to take photos so that they can look back on these specific moments.
Speaking of moments, it sounds like you might not be here if it wasn't for photos.
You are correct. So how my parents met was that my dad was living in Georgia with a few people, including my mom's nephew. And then my mom's nephew came to visit family in Wisconsin. He stole a photo of my mom and brought it back to my dad. And my dad was head over heels, I would say. And so they talked over the phone for a while. This is how I've always seen Hmong people flirt, kind of like, do you like me? I like you. Do you like me? I like you. Do your parents like me? And my dad said that he sent photos to my mom. Did you hear the emphasis on that?
Yeah.
He said he only chose the most handsome photos to send to my mom.
So 6 months pass, and?
Yeah, so he hit up my mom and was like, I'm going to come see you and I'm going to come marry you. And he ended up in Stevens Point, knocked on her door, and...
Yeah.
They're saying that when they got married, that was just their life. That's what they set out to do. Get married, have kids. There's no turning back. They didn't even think that they could get this far.
Yeah, I get that. especially after seeing some of the other photos they shared with us.
My dad was born in 1970 during the Vietnam War. And when he was 13 years old, he decided that he wanted to pursue a better life because he was growing up with the aftermath of the war, which caused a lot of Hmong people to flee Laos. And so he crossed the Mekong River by himself. The river was overflowing with water because it had rained. How long did it rain for, Dad? 7 days, 7 nights, rain. When my dad finally made it to Thailand, he spent a month in jail before finally making it to a refugee camp. And there were photos of him there. And a few years after, my mom and her family also crossed the Mekong River and were in a refugee camp as well. This is Mom. So this photo right here is when my mom was at Panatnikom.
I learned that this is the camp that you were kind of like Americanized, so to speak. Like they would teach you the English language, what to expect in the U.S., how to run a house. And looking at this photo, everyone was so young.
It was very fun for her, living in the camps. The way I imagine it is just like, there's a community there. A community of people who are like all here for a reason and like a bunch of other kids too, y'all. A lot of emphasis on the word koshia, which means like a way to it's a way to describe like longing, sadness. The way she described it is like you go from the first refugee camp, you like connect with the people there, you make friends, and then you only stay there for a short amount of time, and then you move to the next refugee camp. So you miss the people that you've connected with, you've become friends with. She ended up here in the U.S. And she's like, you don't even know what happened to some of these friends. When they were living in the refugee camps, the idea of like, we have to go through this hardship and then we'll live a better life in the U.S. And he was also thinking that even if I live like okay in the U.S., my kids will go off and do better. And looking at his kids now, he is happy. He's content. He feels fulfilled from watching his kids do their own things and succeeding in their own ways.
Oh my God, to have supportive parents. An incredible perspective. Something I did want to know is how they felt about you. Because you haven't just succeeded, but you've also done it, sharing their story and sharing Hmong history, the story of Hmong refugees.
She's happy, but she's also very shy and embarrassed. I think it's because she was saying that it's kind of like you're putting your life out there, and that's scary. And my dad was saying that he's very happy as well, but he also feels like this is just a small fraction of the Hmong story, the Hmong experience. There was a lot more tragedy, a lot more trauma that we couldn't capture, that they couldn't document. And so this is just a small piece of a much bigger picture. This is my grandpa, my mom's dad, who is also a storyteller.
That's it.
So my grandpa's song is about, coming here to the U.S. It's great, it's amazing, but you still long and miss your home country.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your grandpa?
Yeah, well, he's a very talented man. I didn't even know some of the tricks that he pulled out of his pocket when we were recording.
So many tricks.
So he sang for us. He played traditional Hmong instruments. And he grew up in Laos before the war. My grandpa was just talking about how he was growing up. He was someone who listened to his parents, and he didn't play with the kids a lot in his village. And so he's not someone who plays a lot of sports. He was just afraid that he would get hurt if he played.
And here you are in a war for 7 years or whatever.
For the country, it's different.
Some needed background information, which I learned talking with your grandpa, is that the U.S. went into Hmong villages in Laos,
recruited around 30,000 boys and men to fight, including your grandpa.
And as I learned, his brother, which I'm still thinking of that photo of him.
Yeah, that's my grandpa right there. Go ahead, brother and so his brother actually died during the war. He died in the jungle, and they in the field, and they brought his body back, and my grandpa helped do the funeral service for his brother.
I think something that might get lost is just how brutal this war really was, including when the war was kind of like quote unquote over and the U.S. withdrew troops.
Yes, that's when it became more dangerous because the soldiers, they no longer had any weapons to protect themselves and their families. And so many Hmong men and their families who fought in the war were targeted, and they ran to the jungles. He was scared, but then I think they were just thinking about ways to get to Thailand. My grandpa said he's so happy he's been able to watch what's now, the fourth generation of our family, with the grandkids and the great-grandkids all growing up here in Wisconsin. But I wanted to know, reflecting back, how he feels about the war, because it was scary and it was dangerous. That's when he spoke about his brother. He misses his brother. He doesn't tell anyone, but he misses his brother. He says that it's very important for his family to know his story. He just wants them to know his story.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
You know, something I find incredibly interesting about spending time with your family is just that everyone is a storyteller. And so you becoming a filmmaker felt almost inevitable.
Yeah, so storytelling is so deeply rooted in the Hmong culture. For example, my grandpa is a song poet, and he sang for us, which I wasn't expecting him to do. So what took you 2 minutes took me 2 weeks for a project last time. But yeah, and my grandma, she sews flower tapestry, bandao. Bandao is very important to the Hmong culture as well, because for a long time that was how we kept our written language, which we don't really have anymore. And my dad, when he made it to the U.S., he loved to play with mechanics, and camcorders was one of those mechanics that he played with. And as I say in my film as well, you know, the camcorder was handed over to my mom, and she was recording us. Every time I've asked them, like, why did you guys record us when you were growing up? And they really emphasized that we wanted you guys to have something to look back on when you're older. So your history. And so I'm really able to tell these stories because of the sacrifices that they made, because they chose to come to a country where they felt like their children would be successful and really not have to just survive like they did, but to thrive.
You know, to start this, I asked you how you would introduce yourself. And I'm curious, after telling this story, if I asked you now how you'd introduce yourself, if anything would change.
Yeah, I think maybe a little bit. 안녕하세요. 고운배호 gonsoshong. Hi, my name is gonsoshong. You can also call me NK. I am a daughter of Hmong immigrants. I am a Hmong storyteller.
Dạy cho tòa em lòng tao sĩ tương tòa cho trá chém lòng.
That was filmmaker Konswa Shong. WUWM's Jimmy Gutierrez produced that story.
You can find more interviews like this one by visiting wuwm.com/Lake Effect. And while you're there, subscribe to the Lake Effect Spotlight podcast.